I really hope that this works. Yeah, it seems to be working. So I might as well just get into this. Chris Campbell here. I run the Photographer. Thanks for tuning in. Um, Today I'm going over a couple of street photography tips, more aimed at like beginners more than anything else. They're complementary to the fact that we're doing a workshop January 14th to the 15th. It's a 2-day street photography intensive out in LA. You start out in Hollywood and then you go to downtown LA, I believe it is. The event information is actually on our Facebook page in the events. So just to give you guys some help, I'm going to be giving you guys a couple of tips on how to actually take better street photos. So thank you for everyone tuning in right now. Wow, 28 people, it's pretty amazing. Okay, so the first one is shoot wide and consider all the depth of field effects. So why do a lot of street photographers shoot wide? You hear about some street photographers saying that they're going to shoot telephoto, and that's fine because then you can actually get like subject isolation, but shooting wide is generally the easiest thing. The reason why is because if you have, for example, a 24mm lens and an 85mm lens, and they are both set to f5.6 and focused away at 3 feet, the 85mm lens will have less in focus than the 24mm lens will, due to the way depth of field works and due to the wider area. In addition to that too, a lot of street photographers shoot wide because they also like to get close and they also like to give kind of what's considered a normal or human field of view. Some people consider 50mm to be human or normal, and I personally consider 35mm. I know a lot of photographers that actually consider 35mm to be a field of view that they really care about. Some photographers like 24, some photographers like 28. It really just varies, but either way, that's one of the first tips of shooting better street photos. Get wide and get close, and keep that in mind. If you're using an APS-C camera or something like that, you might want to get either a 16mm lens or a 23mm lens or a 24mm lens or something like that, because the crop factor will then give you something a little bit more manageable to work with. If you're using a more full-frame camera, then you can go with 28 or 35, or some people go with 50. It's up to them. Zone focusing and how it works. So a lot of photographers, when they go to start out in street photography, they usually just try to rely on autofocus. And autofocus is pretty reliable and pretty good. I feel like with micro four thirds cameras overall, it's actually the best because you have a smaller sensor and therefore more in focus at a given aperture. But zone focusing is actually one of the tried and true methods that a lot of photographers have been using for forever. So I'm going to show you zone focusing and how it works. Right now, I have a Voigtlander 17.5mm f.95 lens. And the way that works is basically, you look at this. This is called a depth of field meter. Not meter, I'm sorry, scale. And then you look at your apertures. And then this means, so over here it says like f4, and then it has f8, and then it has f16. So basically that means that when you stop down at f4, and you focus to right there, then that much is in focus. But if I stop down f8, then between there and there is in focus. And a lot of photographers use this method because it helps them to actually shoot and ensure that they get a subject quickly in focus. It basically just means they don't have to focus at all. They just have to walk up to a subject and get them in focus. So basically what a lot of them do is they'll stop down to, say, f8, and they'll walk about 6 feet away from their subjects, and they just know they have to be 6 feet away from the subject at f8, and they'll get them perfectly in focus. And that helps them get a lot of better street photos a lot faster and more accurately. It's a tried and true method that's been used for years and years and years. Actually, there are still even photographers that use it today. If you go into a couple of street photography collectives around America or in Europe or you interview a lot of street photographers, a lot of them say that they try to manually focus and they try to use the depth of field effects and zone focusing. So it's very important. Just like hydration. Another tip, always have your camera in hand. This is a problem that I've actually run into a number of times when I'm reviewing cameras. So I'll walk around and I'll have my camera, it'll be slung around me, and sometimes I'll see a moment, and by the time I actually try to put the camera up to my eye, the moment's gone. So it's important to always have a camera in your hand and always be ready. And there are a couple of ways to do that. Well, first off, with conventional camera straps, you kind of get something, actually no. This is a strap by Tap and Die, and Tap and Die is actually wonderful. Let me get my other camera. So this is my Hexar AF, and this is a more traditional camera strap. And, I mean, you could just have it around your neck like this, but then you have to go like this, and then go like this. And that's a little bit more motion. So the way that you actually ensure that it is always ready is I do something like this. I take the end of the camera strap and I put it in between my wrist and my elbow, kind of a little bit closer to my wrist. And then I pull like this. And then I go 1, 2, 3. And then what happens is I have a tight coil, just like this. The camera won't ever fall. Grab it, and now I'm good to go. So I just walk around New York or Brooklyn or Queens or wherever, and I see a moment, and I'm just like, cool. And that's a lot quicker than having to just get it from around your shoulder and go like this. Right, instead I'm doing right now is I'm just going like this. There are a lot of photographers that do use wrist straps, but some prefer the versatility of neck straps. And to show you guys this again, is that a question right there? I do the same. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So this is a regular strap, and you position it to a little bit between your wrist and your elbow, and you pull tight, and then you go 1, 2, 3, and then if someone tries to rob you, it's not coming off. It's really not coming off. They're gonna have to rip off your forearm more than anything else, and it works pretty well because the camera's always in your hand. So always keep the camera in your hand, and I'm sorry about that. I just had a call. Sorry about that. Always be cognizant of that stuff. What else? Something that I like to say is shoot first, ask questions later, and I guess that's kind of gimmicky, but it actually makes a lot of sense. The reason why is because if you sit there and you see a moment and your mind kind of reacts to it like, oh, this is really cool, I'm feeling an emotion towards this, you should shoot it. There are ethics involved there that I'm going to get to right afterwards, but what I always say is, and this goes more for people who create than for people who capture, but it can also be applied to people who capture. Shoot what you feel. So when you see a moment and you feel something about it, then shoot it. If you are on the streets of, let's say, Chicago, and you see a couple kind of being intimate with one another by sharing a tender kiss in the middle of an entire major, like, plethora of people going back and forth, that image contrasting against the rest of the chaos can actually probably be something very, very emotional and worth capturing and showing to the rest of the world. But you usually just have to, one, be ready to be able to capture it, and two, just go for it. Sometimes you just go and you just shoot something. So shoot whatever you feel, and shoot first and ask questions later. The last one that I'm getting to is don't take advantage of people, like the poor. This is a really big one in the street photography community because there are a lot of photographers that will go out there and say that they're documenting the human condition and trying to tell the story of all these poor people. The thing is that's kind of taking advantage of them unless there's full communication back and forth that you have permission to do this. And obviously out in the streets, there's also the assumption and law usually that anything that you capture out in the streets is totally illegal and totally fine. But I'm just seeing what that says. Great tips. Cool. Thanks, Fred. But there are still ethics involved. If someone isn't really doing the best, they could be better in life. You're not really going to do very much to be able to help those people unless you have a very specific project documenting the homeless in New York. And if that's the case, then you should actually try to do a full documentary project. And that's different than street photography. Documentary, photojournalism, and street photography do share a couple of major elements, but they're not the same exact thing. Street photography is more about actually trying to capture candid photos on the streets, and so forth. So try not to take advantage of people. It's really not nice. It's not very ethical, and it just makes no sense. It's tacky. It's very tacky. Sorry about that. Quick question. I offer the homeless cash and ask permission first. Donna's saying that she offers the homeless cash and asks for permission first. I used to do that. Usually that's okay. And see, in that case then, someone is kind of posing for you, and I think that that's more of a street portrait or something like that. That's usually fine. No problems. Or if they're just going about their day and you choose to follow them and you ask them for permission, then yeah, fine. That's totally fine. Just remember, though, a lot of people think that photojournalism and street photography are the same exact things, and you can't sit there and, like, crop out something that's kind of making your photo crap, but you absolutely can. So if you see a scene and, for example, there's, like, a light pole that's terrible, you can either crop it out or you can clone it out or something like that. It's not photojournalism. Just go ahead and do it. Caught the close and wider stuff earlier. Any other composition frames and tips? Composition frames and tips. I think usually what you can do is you can try to center your subject first and then crop later. But the workshop that we're doing in LA later on this month, on the 14th and the 15th, it's a 2-day street photography intensive, starts in Hollywood and then ends up in downtown Los Angeles. On the 14th and 15th of January, it's really affordable. It's stupid cheap, actually. And if anything, I'm ballsy enough to say that they are the best deals in photography education right now on the web. If you go to that, you get an in-person tutorial with the photographer's very own Daniel Schaefer, and he'll be able to teach you that more in person. Composition really depends on a number of things, because as you're walking through a scene, various elements are changing, so it really just varies. But what I can say is try to center everything first and then maybe crop out later. What does that say? Do you ever scout locations with, say, interesting shadow, or, oh, hi, Jamie, or light placement, and then wait for someone to walk into it, or do you prefer spontaneous? That's a great question. So, Jamie's asking if I do scouts of locations and shoot and wait for the good light and then wait for someone to come in, or do I do spontaneous stuff? I personally like to do a combination of both. I really like to be able to see stuff, like, for example, if I'm walking in New York in Little Italy, and the way that the light is reflecting off the buildings at a certain time will kind of give off these interesting shadows. Sometimes I'll actually sit there, I'll wait for something really cool to happen, and actually a lot of photographers do that we've interviewed on the site. One that is fantastic at this, his name is Jonathan Higbee. If you go to the website and just go to the search bar and then type in Jonathan Higbee, you'll actually see that. There are a lot of photographers that do that. There are some photographers that just like to go about looking for candid things. And then there are photographers that actually kind of do a combination of both. So, in a street photography collective that I'm part of, and they're called the New York City Street Photography Collective. You can check them out on Facebook. And if you're in New York, you can join. One of the photographers, his name's Sebastian, he works around Bryant Park, and there's this one alley street that he really likes being on, and he'll just sit up there and he'll walk about and he'll wait for random things to happen, or he'll just sit there, he'll look at the light, and he'll be like, okay, fine, I'll just wait here and I'll shoot stuff. And he'll capture really great emotions and moments on people's faces, and then he'll also just capture really interesting things overall, like the way that the shadows are falling with contrast in a scene, and a whole bunch of different things. So there are a whole bunch of obvious, no, I wouldn't necessarily say obvious, I'm sorry. There are a whole bunch of different ways that you can approach this. When you're starting out, though, I would recommend actually just looking for good light and then waiting for something to happen. When you start to get a little bit more advanced and a little bit more ballsy, then go right up to a person and take a photo. So, yeah, that's really what I recommend. Yeah, no other questions at the moment. I'm going to take the moment to once again remind everyone that later on this month, January 14th and 15th, we have a street photography workshop happening in LA. And we're starting it in Hollywood, and then we're taking it to downtown LA. You're starting on the 14th. You'll be shooting on Hollywood Boulevard with the photographer's own Daniel Schaefer, who's been teaching workshops for many years, and is also a fantastic street photographer. He's taught workshops at Adorama and a bunch of other places. He also used to work for Leica. And then the day after, you're going to downtown LA to basically do the same thing, but he's going to be giving everyone instruction, and specifically personalized instruction. He's going to be giving everyone tips as they're all doing this, and everyone is going to get to shoot, and everyone's going to definitely come away as a better photographer. Plus, in addition to that, when you sign up, you get access to our brand new Frameworks Photography workshop group. These are special. This is a special photography workshop group on Facebook that is targeting the photographers' audience and people that sign up for our workshops. So, yeah, and there are going to be cool perks in the future, so keep that in mind. Are there any other questions? Doesn't look that there are any other questions, but if anyone does have them, go ahead and ask. Yeah, that looks like that's the end of it. So yeah, just to recap very quickly, because I want to give you guys the best that I possibly can. Shoot wide, get close, stop down, keep in mind the depth of field effects. I recommend not usually going any more telephoto than a 50mm. In fact, 50mm I kind of hate. I really just don't like the 50mm field of view. I usually go for 35 or 28. Zone focusing. I'll go over that one more time before I end the video. Always have your camera in hand. I'm also going to show that off one more time before I end. Shoot first, ask questions later, and then also don't take advantage of people like the homeless. So let me show you very quickly once again the way that I actually keep my camera ready with me at all times. So this is what you don't do. You don't just put it around your neck and then say, oh, my hands are free. Cool. No, the moment can be gone. You don't put it around your shoulder and then say, oh, cool. No, the moment can be gone. What you do is you use a regular strap like this, and then you place it in between the wrist and the elbow, closer to the wrist. You pull tight, then you go 1, 2, and then 3, and then the camera kind of turns into a wrist strap. Well, the strap kind of turns into a wrist strap. It's very tightly in, and all you have to do now is literally just go, and you're all set. Is that a question? No, that's not a question. So that's how you always keep your camera in your hand. And now zone focusing one last time. A lot of photographers, when they do street photography, they use manual focus lenses. The reason why is because it allows them to zone focus easier. What is zone focusing? When you look at a manual focus lens like this, you have what's called a depth of field scale, kind of right there. Maybe I can get that in focus. Let's see. Whatever. Yes? No? Okay. So you have a zone depth of field scale right there. And that's f4, that's f8, and then that's f16. So basically, if you stop down to f4, then that to that is in focus, which can mean anything from like 4 feet away to 6 feet away. And then if you stop down, then it can mean anything from 3 feet away to 8 feet away. And then you stop down again, It can mean anything from everything, actually, in focus. No, this is not a Helios. This is a Voigtlander 17.5 f.95, which basically means it's like a 35mm f.95 lens on the original OMD EM5. The EM5 is personally my favorite camera ergonomically in the OMD line because it's just so simple, and it puts the exposure controls right where you need them. Olympus has done a great job with the other cameras, but as far as simplicity goes and as far as actual pro use goes, this is actually still my favorite. Does anyone have any questions? Mirrorless versus traditional DSLRs. I specifically prefer mirrorless cameras. The reason why is because they are smaller and they're more low profile, they're less inconspicuous, and they don't really alert people anywhere as much. Like, for example, if you were looking at me and I was shoving this big thing in your face versus this small thing is going to intimidate you a hell of a lot less than this big thing, partially because of the lens. So I try to keep my camera as small as I possibly can. I also still personally shoot with film cameras most of the time because of the fact that they're smaller overall. I do prefer mirrorless cameras. Micro Four Thirds is actually absolutely the best thing for street photography because of the fact that you have the fastest focusing in the world. So if you want to use autofocus, that's really the best thing to go with. Sony is pretty good, Fujifilm is pretty good, but absolutely nothing will beat the autofocusing that Micro Four Thirds will give you. Combine that with the depth of field effects of the fact that you have a 2x cropped sensor, so f1.8 on full frame, then becomes f3.6 in terms of depth of field, but the light gathering abilities are still the same. So it's perfect for street photography. And actually, whenever I get a Micro Four Thirds camera in, I always make sure that I test it specifically for street photography. Sony cameras I usually test mostly doing landscapes or portraits or some event stuff, and then Fuji cameras, combination of everything, really. I don't think there are any other questions. So yeah, guys, thank you once again for tuning in. Just reminding everyone about the workshop that we have in LA. If you go to our Facebook page and you go to the events, you'll see the workshop is available there on Eventbrite. It's a 2-day intensive workshop. It's really stupidly affordable, and I encourage you all to sign up. Or if you're in the New York area, on, I think it's the 14th or the 15th. Either way, it's that weekend, and it's 1 day. I am doing a Instax-wide photography workshop in the studio at Lomography, and I'm teaching everyone how to take professional quality photos with, I guess, lo-fi film like that. And everything's going to look really cool, and you're going to learn a hell of a lot about not only lighting, but also portraiture, and how to work with that film to get a different look that you can offer clients if you want. And that's really about it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I guess you guys don't have any other questions? Yeah, I guess that's it. Alright, guys, I'm going to end it here, I guess. So take care, and just remember to sign up for the workshops.